Welcome to the Show Day Podcast. Today's July 15th, 2019. We are now less than 4 weeks from the DCI World Championships, August 8th through the 10th in Indianapolis. This week is one of the most critical weeks of the season for each and every drum corps as the corps make their way throughout the Midwest, join with corps that they have not competed against so far this season, and make the trek down to the Southwest for the DCI Southwestern Championship in San Antonio this upcoming Saturday, where we'll see all 22 world-class corps in attendance there, plus a few other groups. So really a critical week this week, and it all got started last night with 2 shows, one in Georgia and one in Illinois. So I'll get to those today, plus take a look ahead at today and what we'll see tonight, because we've got 3 shows tonight. Not necessarily big shows, but a big night in general when we look at who's competing and who they're competing against tonight. So as I said, one show last night was in Georgia, the Atlanta Brass Classic in Woodstock, Georgia. This was a joint event between both DCI and DCA. So we had 4 DCI open class corps in attendance here, 2 DCA open class corps, and then 1 DCA A class corps. I'll get to the DCA corps in just a minute, but first the DCI open class corps. So we had the Legends, Louisiana Stars, Southwind, and Heatwave here. We saw them compete already on Saturday night in Millbrook, Alabama. The Legends got a big advantage over the field. Louisiana Stars they had a larger gap over Southwind than what we had been seeing between the two. And then Heatwave, we kind of saw them playing around down in the lower 50 range where we've seen them. So first in general effect, Legends are 26.5. A good score for them. I'm not sure the Legends are the championship favorite. I don't even know if they have a shot at the championship. Nobody knows that right now with what we know about the open class corps that are going to championships currently. Right now, I would say either Gold or Spartans are the championship favorites, but the Legends are, in my mind, definitely a top 3 medal contender, if not a lock. So really, between those 3 corps, one of those will become the open class champion at the end of the year. At least that's what I see happening. With the Louisiana Stars and Southwind, if you look at general effect, Louisiana Stars are only ahead by a tenth. It's a 25.4 to a 25.3. So really a small margin there. So not what we had been seeing, and then Heatwave down in 4th at a 21.3. When we head over to visual, this gets interesting with Louisiana Stars and Southwind. Legends are ahead, nothing to talk about with them compared to these two. But when we look at visual proficiency, Louisiana Stars ahead by 0.2. Visual analysis, you've got Southwind actually ahead by 0.3 there. And then color guard, Louisiana Stars take that back by 0.2. So what does that mean on the overall visual sheets? Louisiana Stars at an 18.35, Southwind at an 18.3, so just half a tenth there separating the two. So if you add the general effect and visual margins together, you only have a tenth and a half so far for Louisiana Stars and Southwind. When we look at music, this is really where the Louisiana Stars pull ahead and really get most of their gap over Southwind in. Again, Legends ahead, a point in brass, 0.5 in analysis, and then 0.9 in percussion. So not a whole lot to talk about there. But then when we look at Louisiana Stars, Southwind doesn't even come close. When we look at the overall music, total is an 18.95 for the Louisiana Stars and 18.05 for Southwind. A big margin there. Southwind down 0.9, and then Heatwave down at 15.65. So overall, in the show, 66.45 for the Legends, and 62.7 for the Louisiana Stars. Just over a point. The Louisiana Stars top Southwind by, and this one, Southwind is 61.65, and then Heatwave finishes with a 52.7. Big thing that comes out of this show, both the Legends increase their total total margin over the Louisiana Stars, and also Southwind does close in on the Louisiana Stars in this one, mainly in visual and general effect, but also the music gap. It kind of stays the same, goes down actually a little bit. As I said, DCA cores here as well. A-class core, we had Carolina Gold here, 69.6 final score. And then when we look at open class, nothing to talk about. Atlanta CV and Southern Knights really the top of the open class division and kind of the bottom of the open class division. Atlanta CV, it's going to be interesting to see as they go on. Are they a championship contender? So far, it looks like between them, the Caballeros, and Reading, that they're kind of all close together. So I'll talk about this a little later on the leaderboards, but right now it looks like those three are the runaway favorites for the championship, especially the Buccaneers, as always. And then the Southern Knights here as well. First year is an open class core in DCA. A good score put up for their first show of the season, a 62.1. The second show last night, this is the big premier event of the night. DCI St. Louis, Belleville, Illinois, one open class score here, the Guardians. And right now, really, we can't compare them to anything. They're really doing something we have not seen from them. And that is not necessarily competing against their fellow open class scores, kind of going and just doing a tour by themselves. We saw them in Memphis with a bunch of world-class scores. We saw them in Belleville last night. We'll see them tonight in Olathe. Really not going along the traditional lines, because if they did that, they would probably been in Millbrook and then in Woodstock and then maybe traveling up to Augusta. But that's not necessarily what they're doing. They're kind of staying in the Midwest, and then, of course, they'll be a part of Texas tour in the next week. So last night, 58.2 for them. Some people have said that they're a little bit of a disappointment this year, that we would have liked more out of the Guardians. And sure, I can agree with that. I have not seen their show. I did not see them in Memphis on Flow, so I can't really say a lot. But based on their scores right now, I'm sure they'd like to be up in the 60s already, maybe contending with where the Louisiana Stars and Southwind currently stand, rather than be stuck still in the upper 50s. When we look at world class in DCI St. Louis, here's what we've got. So, general effect, I've been saying all season, if you finish first, you're going to finish first in the show. If you finish eighth, you're going to finish eighth in the show. And really, that did not change with this one. I'm still waiting for somebody to pass somebody in general effect. The best we've seen, really, at least recently, has been ties in general effect. I'm still waiting for somebody to defeat a core above them. When we look at margins or scores here, we've got the Bluecoats at a 35.3. They're 7/10 above the Boston Crusaders. And that gap there between those two is actually larger than the gap between Boston and the Cavaliers, which is 6/10 in general effect. We've been seeing all year the Boston Crusaders general effect score has not been necessarily where they want it to be. I think they'd much rather have that be in the 35s than 34s, or maybe above the Bluecoats, but unfortunately for them right now, it's not. When we look farther down here after those three, you've got the Blue Stars. They're 5/10 above the Mandarins, and the Blue Stars are looking really, really good right now, especially in general effect. It's where they're better captions. Mandarins, as I said, 5th, 32.2, then Phantom, yikes, is all I can say in general effect. And the same thing that's hurting them is hurting Spirit. And Spirits, I guess you could say unlucky that they're hurting in general effect, because if they were successful in general effect and Phantom was struggling, that'd be good for them. And Phantom's lucky because they're bad in general effect, but so is Spirit. So really, they can't affect each other too much. You've got Phantom 1.1 behind the Mandarins in general effect, and then Spirit 7/10 back from Phantom. So really not where those two would want to be in that caption. Going over to visual, you've got the Bluecoats and the Boston Crusaders just switching in color guard, but you also see Boston coming close to the Cavaliers in visual proficiency, just a 10th. So overall visual, Bluecoats win by 4/10 over Boston. If Boston's going to do something, it has to be in visual, and they're not being able to pull that off. Cavaliers farther back, 1.1 behind the Bluecoats, 7/10 behind Boston. Then you've got the Blue Stars 3.5 tenths above the Mandarins. Then another big cutoff back to Phantom. And then Spirit down at a 23.25, 3/10 behind Phantom Regiment. Looking at music, then, you've got brass, and this is interesting. You've got the Bluecoats only 2/10 above the Boston Crusaders, a 17.7 to a 17.5. The Cavaliers have not broken 17, at least of this show, at a 16.9. And don't ask me what happened there, because they were contending with the Blue Devils earlier in the season in brass, and now they're barely able to hold the Blue Stars off in this caption, where you see the Blue Stars just 2/10 back. After the Blue Stars in brass, you've got the Mandarins in 5th at a 16.2. Spirit actually topping Phantom Regiment, a 15.9 to a 15.7. And Phantom, I said this yesterday, I believe, if there's one corps I can't figure out their scores, it's Phantom Regiment. I mean, scores that should be high, at least in my mind, from watching them a few times, are not, and scores that are or that should be low are high. Really just a few things not making sense. Like, for example, something that should be high, at least in my mind, is brass, especially, and I know I might be just picking out one thing in their show, but that whole Carmina Burana thing in the beginning, I keep referencing this, it's one of my favorite moments in the show this season. I feel like they should get a few tenths for that, and maybe that's just me, but and they're trailing Spirit here, so really just some things not lining up with where I see them right now. But again, I'm just a fan. I'm not anywhere close to a judge. So analysis, then you've got everybody falling in line 1 through 8. The Bluecoats are 3/10 above Boston, and then in percussion, Boston's made up some of that ground to the Bluecoats, just 3/10 back now, and another 3/10 back to the Cavaliers. 4th place in percussion, Phantom's strongest thing, so they got 4th, 16.5. 5th, a 16.3 goes to the Blue Stars. 6th is the Mandarins at a 16 even, not their strongest caption for is percussion. Colts are 7th, 15.7, and Spirit in 8th at a 15.6. When we look at overall totals, Bluecoats just 1.5 ahead of Boston, something we're going to have to look out for as the season progresses. We've got the Cavaliers at an 84.6, exactly 2 points behind the Boston Crusaders. The Blue Stars in 4th at an 81.85. They are about 1.35, or exactly 1.35 above the Mandarins. Mandarins get 5th at an 80.5, and then there's a bit of a drop-off. You've got Phantom there sitting in 6th at this one, 12th overall, with everybody at a 78.65, Spirit at a 77.15, and the Colts at a 75.4. So after last night, and really after the weekend, let's take a look at the DCI World Class Leaderboard. So at the top, after the weekend, who sits there? We've got the Bluecoats, 88.1 last night in the St. Louis area. So they're the first score to break 88. Keep in mind some things. Vanguard did not have a show last night. The Blue Devils have not competed since the 10th. That's Wednesday night. They were supposed to be in Denver. That show got rained out. So really, if you think 2 points in 5 days, I think the Blue Devils will come out tonight, and they're going to be 88, 89 tonight. And a lot of people are going to be shocked at how high they score. I'm honestly not going to be. And if there's one thing that you need to know about the Boston Crusaders Blue Devils gap, or really the Blue Devils against any of these scores except the Bluecoats, Vanguard, after a few days of competition, so you've got, or not necessarily a few days of competition, but a few days of rehearsal. So Vanguard scores Saturday, Blue Devils score was Wednesday. They're still within a point. The Blue Devils are still within a point of Vanguard. And then when we look at Boston, between the 10th and 14th, those two scores happen. Blue Devils are almost topping Boston in a 5-day span, pretty much. So really, the Blue Devils, I still think, are the championship favorites. Bluecoats, at this point right now, unless Vanguard makes significant changes to their show, I think the Bluecoats are the only core that could give the Blue Devils a run for their money this year. Looking farther down the rankings, you've got those six. They're what they are. But we also look down with, let's say, the Blue Stars, Mandarins, Blue Knights, the Cadets, Phantom Regiment, Crossmen, Spirit of Atlanta. That's all fun. And that I know I've kind of changed my tone into saying this season's not looking too competitive after all. But if there's one area you need to watch, it's between 7 and 13, because any night, at least as I see it right now, any night, as things stand right now, the Blue Stars can finish 7th and the Blue Stars can finish, let's say, 10th. The Crossmen can finish 7th. They can finish 12th also. Spirit's the only core in here that's kind of farther back, and I'm not sure what they got to do to change things up, but they need to do something because they're struggling to be able to pull in the finals right now. Looking at the open class side of things, really take the cores that are going to championships. You've got Gold, you got the Legends, you got the Louisiana Stars, Golden Empire, Southwind, River City Rhythm, Spartans, and that's just from the top 10 here. The Spartans, they've not had a show since July 1st. Expect them, they're going to come out on Wednesday night in Augusta, and they're going to blow everybody away. I will not be surprised for the Spartans to break 70, if not higher up, because I've not seen the show. Again, I'm going to say that. But they are where they scored at the 60.9 and how that's holding up. They look like they're going to be, at least how I see it right now, the championship favorites in open class. And then, as I said, the Guardians maybe a little bit disappointing right now. Shadow, they had a show on the 12th, Friday night. They're off now. They have some other competitions. They do the MAC BDA thing, that circuit. So they're now off until Cape Girardeau on the 26th. So 57-8 though, a good score for them early in the season. Then finally with the leaderboards, taking a look at the DCA side of things, you've got Reading on the top, Atlanta CV, and really the reason I bring this up now is because everybody, with the exception of the White Sabres and Cincinnati Tradition, competed this past weekend. Some at different shows, Southern Knights and Atlanta CV at other shows, but the other cores were all at the same show. So you've got Reading about 1.25 ahead of where Atlanta CV scored. Reading's also 2.05 ahead of the Caballeros. I think those top three are kind of the runaway favorites for medals. And then you look at Bushwhackers, White Sabres, Fusion, Hurricanes could throw themselves into that. So that group there, and then kind of the bottom group, Southern Knights, Sunrisers, and I'm not really sure where Cincinnati Tradition falls in, but I think it's that bottom group. And then on A class, you've got Carolina Gold, significantly above where the Skyliners scored, 10 points, and then the Columbus Saints at a 53.15. That score is a few weeks old, so I'm sure they're about where the Skyliners are, if not above. And then when the Governors get thrown into things in early August, that is when we'll see all of these scores with scores. Tonight, 3 shows, as I stated earlier. First up, Brass Impact in Olathe, Kansas. All-time Central here, 7:30, Welcome a National Anthem. Then we've got 2 open class scores. We've got the Colt Cadets and we've got the Guardians. Colt Cadets keep rising. They've been kind of stuck in the 54 range, but I think they're going to be 55, 56, 57 tonight. Guardians, you got to break 60 sometime. No better time than now. Then we've got 4 world-class scores here. We've got the Troopers before intermission, and then Pacific Crest, Bluecoats, and the Colts. Then at 9:40, an encore by the Colts, and 10 o'clock scores are announced. This week is always my favorite, or at least one of my favorite weeks of the year, because we finally get to see, let's say, just at this one, we've got the Troopers and Pacific Crest who have been out west, and we have them combining with the Bluecoats and the Colts. Not that these scores are anywhere close to each other, especially like Bluecoats and Pacific Crest, but when we look at like Colts versus Pacific Crest versus the Troopers, that that is a very intriguing battle between those three. And so really, as we mix these guys all together, it really makes for some very interesting competition, where right now we're like, okay, the same results keep happening night in and night out. But now that we kind of mix everything up, results do change a bit. The second show is Drums Across Kansas in El Dorado. It's presented by the City of El Dorado Convention and Visitors Bureau. All Time Central here as well. 7 o'clock Welcome National Anthem. This one is very, very, very interesting. And I mean, you look at these 4 before intermission, and we look at the 2 after. And this show is one of the best of the season to date. No cores outside the top 12 here, okay? So we've got 6 finalists. We got half of finals here. You've got the Mandarins, you've got the Crossmen, you've got the Blue Knights, and you've got the Cadets before intermission. We've not seen the Cadets against the Blue Knights so far this season, but we have seen the Cadets against the Crossmen, but it's only been on a partial panel. So between those two, and this was supposed to happen in Denver the other night, this Cadets Blue Knights Crossmen battle, but that show got rained out, as I said earlier. So you've got the Cadets Blue Knights Crossmen, and I'm not sure how they're going to come out. If I had to predict, I'd say the Cadets will come out on top, but I think that might change a little bit as the season goes on, with the Blue Knights and Blue Stars just getting so good. The Blue Stars show is just awesome. And then we also look at the Mandarins here as well, and they're interesting because we've not seen them against the Crossmen, or close to the Crossmen at least. And then also the Blue Knights, they have not faced the Mandarins in a few weeks, so that's interesting. And then after intermission, of course, we've got Santa Clara Vanguard, we've got the Blue Devils, and those two are 2 of the 3 championship contenders right now, and they've not competed since June 30th. So how will things change? That's the show where we're like, okay, the Blue Devils are good. They won by half a tenth. And now how will that change? I remember looking at this on July 1st on that podcast and saying their next meeting is July 15th, and now it's July 15th. So how do things change in a few weeks' time? We'll see tonight. Final show tonight is Music on the Move in Bentonville, Arkansas. 5 world-class cores here. We have Jersey Surf, we have Music City, the Madison Scouts, the Academy, and Carolina Crown in attendance. The Crown's performance will be followed by an encore, and then scores will be announced. So, what are we looking for here? Crown, they've got to keep going up. If they could break 87 or 88 tonight, that's good for them, especially 88. That'd be high, but anything's possible. And then when we look at the Academy and the Madison Scouts and Music City, I'm not sure how close Music City is to the Academy, but Music City might be pretty close to Madison. So we'll have to see how those two come out of tonight looking. And then we've also got Jersey Surf here as well. Where do they fall? Can they break 70? That'd be big for them. So that's all you need to know for tonight's 3 shows. Thank you for watching the podcast today. Just a few things. Make sure to visit my website, drumcorpscentral.weebly.com, for all the latest updates from the DCI and DCA summer tours. Scores, schedules, leaderboards, and more can all be found on my own personal website about all things drum corps. Make sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at DrumCorpsGeek, and subscribe to the Show Day podcast on YouTube, where this episode and more will be posted. And finally, leave your thoughts in the comment sections. Questions, input, comments, etc. would all be greatly appreciated. So thank you for watching. I'll have a few things actually popping up on my website this week. I'm starting out the first part of my mid-season reviews of cores today, so be on the lookout for that, and then I'll be continuing that throughout the week. So thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your Monday.